So we've done the science around nuclear energy generation. So what about the economics? One of Australia's foremost economists is Warwick McKibbin, Distinguished Professor and Director of the ANU Centre for Applied Macroeconomic Analysis in the Crawford School of Public Policy at the ANU. The former Reserve Bank Director also has been a strong advocate for economic policies that encourage energy transition and also to reduce emissions. And he joins me now from Canberra. Warwick, many thanks for your time. Just remind me your role in the 2006 review into the potential for a nuclear energy industry in Australia, chaired by Ziggy Switkowski. What was your role in that?
Yeah, hi Ross, great to be here. My job was to be the economist on the expert panel, and we looked at the entire nuclear cycle from mining uranium all the way through power generation, through disposal for long-term security issues. So we covered a lot of material, and I brought the economic perspective to each of those chapters.
Okay, so when you look back at that review now and you bring it forward into today's environment with the need for emissions reductions, but the need for baseload power is as strong as it ever has been, is there a case, do you think, today for nuclear energy as part of our mix?
Well, I mean, that is a very good question in the review, and it's very current, actually. I looked at it just recently, and if you cannot find it in the government website, it's available at my website, sensiblepolicy.com. What we found there are a few things that are different. We've moved ahead almost 20 years. The price of renewables has come down a lot more than we forecast. The technologies have evolved a lot. Battery technology has improved a lot and become a lot cheaper. Also, there's new technologies in small-scale reactors being developed but not yet commercially on the market. There was a case back in 2006, but we argued at the time the complexity involved in creating not just building the reactors, and there was going to be at least a 20-year delay because of excess demand in the global economy for reactors, but also the personnel, the engineers, the nuclear engineers, building an education system where we have more than one nuclear science course in Australia. We needed regulators. You needed a sort of human capital which would be extremely difficult to build very quickly. Now, that really hasn't changed. There are more technology options available in the nuclear space. And so it is technically feasible to move towards a nuclear power. We have nuclear in Australia already for medical isotopes. But the key problem we have is how quickly can you do it and at what cost? And I think the cost advantage has moved towards renewables since we did that report. And I think the delays have reduced in terms of construction. I think it just needs a comprehensive report before you actually go down this road, because it is a big step to take.
Is the notion of being sort of energy agnostic, is that the idea of lifting the nuclear bans and then ultimately the most commercially viable source of energy will ultimately prevail? Is that the best solution from an economic point of view?
Well, again, it's quite complex because different regions of Australia are probably going to have a different technological solution. You won't be building nuclear reactors in the middle of nowhere that require enormous amount of transmission to get to the population centres. So you probably have different technologies in different regions. As we have now, we have a lot of solar and other renewables in regions where it's just not cost effective to put people on the grid. And so it really is diversification across the country and across the technology types. Secondly, the issue of transmission is a key issue in the current debate. And one of the problems of centralised power, like nuclear, like coal-fired power, is that it means you do have to have a lot of transmission lines, whereas there are some arguments for, say, South Coast, New South Wales, where you could have very small localised community power plants based on solar or wind. That's got several advantages. One is a lot cheaper than transmitting power down the East Coast, but secondly, it is actually a lot more reliable when we have climate events like forest bushfires or floods. And so there is this resilience issue that you also have to take into account. And that's one of the critical problems of waiting to get the nuclear cycle to come online while we have coal-fired power stations that are at the end of their life. The reliability of those coal-fired power stations becomes a real risk for generation because they're a large part of the electrical power base in the country, and if one or two of them go down, as we've seen historically, that puts the economy at enormous risk. So there's a lot of factors involved here, not just can you do it, how much it costs, but the reliability and the resilience of the system is really important. The second point I'd stress is whatever you do, you have to get both sides of politics engaged in the same strategy, because these are investments that we're asking the private sector to undertake with very long-term payoffs. time periods of 20 to 30 to 50 years for nuclear. And you're not going to invest that amount of money if you think the next government is going to change the strategy. And that's the risk of bringing nuclear into the debate right now. If it's going to be brought in, it has to be brought in as a bipartisan strategy to have a diversified energy mix in the economy going forward.
See, that's the point, because as soon as you say, right, we, the government, are going to bring in nuclear energy, people who might otherwise be considering putting money in to build the renewables may very well walk away from the scene, considering that they may be crowded out by what the government is planning to do in 25 years' time.
And that's exactly right, Ross. And when you're making long-term investments, there's various types of risks you have to take into account. There's the economic risk, what will be the demand for electricity going out over the next 30 years. There's geopolitical risk at the global level. Will there be a major war that's going to push energy prices through the roof? Will there be some incredible innovation in artificial intelligence, which is going to totally transform the way economies work? And there's political risk. Political risk we can control. The other risk is out of our control, but political risk we can control. And it's been very costly to the Australian economy since the early 2000s, when we should have gone down this road after the Howard Nuclear Review. We should have carbon pricing, a very efficient way of getting behavioural change across the economy. We should have diversified portfolio of investments in all sorts of different types of energies, including nuclear at that time. It was a viable alternative, but we keep delaying and we keep changing, and the politics is destroying the potential future of the Australian economy.
I want to go to one other aspect, because there's no doubt right now that energy has been a key component in inflation in Australia. The uncertainty of energy prices, the uncertainty of the mix, and that also makes the job of the Reserve Bank much more difficult right now, trying to control inflation at a time when trying to keep employment as full as it possibly can. That, to me, and from what I'm hearing, is an experiment that central banks around the world, if they have tried it, certainly haven't succeeded in doing. What's your own sense about this strategy of trying to glide the inflation rate down while keeping as many people in jobs as is possible?
So every country is different, but there are common themes across the world, and the common themes of this surge in inflation came from the post-COVID policy, well, policies during COVID of loose monetary, loose fiscal policy, plus the war in Ukraine pushing up energy prices. That pushed a common inflation shock throughout the world economy. And then within Australia, we had our own additional shocks coming from very loose monetary policy for too long and very loose fiscal policy. What's happening right now in Australia is we still have very loose fiscal policy. We have state governments increasing their budget spendings to try and win elections in, say, Queensland. We have federal government nowhere near cutting the fiscal spending as much as needed. So we have a lot of demand in the economy. Inflation is the result of demand being in excess of supply. And so we have no productivity growth, which is the core problem behind our cost of living crisis. It's not that there's inflation. If we have inflation of 3.6%, that wouldn't be such a problem if our incomes were growing at 6.6%. Because everybody would still be better off each year, even though their prices are rising. So the key problem in this crisis, cost of living crisis, is low productivity.
It is always great to have in the program and chat about these things, from energy to our interest rate settings right now. Many thanks for your time today.
Great to be here, Ross. Thanks very much.